All right, brothers and sisters, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Don't be anxious and don't worry about it, because worrying literally does nothing for you except for making things worse, at least for your health and your mental health and your physical health and your spiritual health. Don't worry about it. And Jesus, he said this in the Word of God, and I'm going to read that in a second. Okay. Most of what we worry about and are anxious about, most of the time, those things don't even happen anyway. And those things that we're worried about and anxious about, like I said, they usually don't even happen, don't even come to pass. Okay. Like my friend, he used to say, worrying is like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but gets you nowhere. Literally, worrying gets you nowhere. It gives you something to do, but it gets you nowhere. And Jesus, he doesn't want us to worry. He doesn't want us to be anxious. He said, be anxious for nothing. Let me read it over here in Matthew chapter 6. If you go to Matthew chapter 6, you will see, he says right here, he says, okay, 1 second. Matthew chapter 6, he says it a couple of times. Verse 25, he says, I tell you, hold on 1 second. He says, I tell you, don't worry about everyday life. Whether you have enough food or drink, enough food or enough drink or clothes. Doesn't life consist of more than food and clothing? Look at the birds, and he talks about the plants and everything like this. Okay, now, then he asks again, down to verse 28, he says, why are you worried about your clothes? So again, he's talking about, he's asking, why are you worried? He's stressing this over and over. Why are you worrying about it? You can read it for yourself. Verse 25 all the way down, okay? Then he says again in verse 31, he says, so don't worry about having enough food or drink or clothing. He says this is already twice he said this. He's stressing this. He does not want us to worry. If you worry or you stress about something, that obviously is a clear indication that you're not trusting in God. You're not trusting in your Father. I don't call him God. I call him my Father, because he says when you pray like this, our Father who is in heaven. So he's our Father. Okay. So you got to understand and know him as your Father. And when you do that and you understand that he's your Father and you get close to him, you call him you call him Father, then even personally, even more, you can make it even more personal. It says in, I think in Romans, he says he given us a spirit whereby we call him Abba, Father. And that's the Hebrew word Abba. And that in English means dad. So you can even call him dad. I call him dad in my private time. I call him dad. That'll make your relationship a lot more personal when you call him dad and you get to know him as your dad and not just God. Yeah, he's the king, he's God. But when you know him as your dad, as your father, I'm telling you. So you call him father, that makes him even close. But when you call him your dad, that even makes it even closer. And that's what it says. Abba, Father. Abba means dad in English. So now he says it already right there. He says, don't worry about having this and that. All right, now we go down all the way to 34. He says, so don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will bring its own worries. Bring its own trouble. He says, today's trouble is enough for today. Now, when Jesus, if he says it 2-3 times, he's got to be serious. It's got to be something that is a serious thing. So don't worry. Don't worry. Jesus, he said it, if Jesus himself said it and he's God, you know what I'm saying? And he didn't worry. I don't think we should worry, because if he lived this life and he didn't worry one time in his whole life, then we shouldn't worry, So God took care of him, while he walked this world. So don't worry, don't stress. All that anxiety and stuff, that's from Satan. That's not from God. And that's your flesh also, not trusting in God. So you got to surrender and trust in your Father, which is in heaven, that he has everything under control. Because you see all over the news on a daily basis, everywhere, all over the internet, it's always trying to get us to worry about something. What if this is going to happen? What if that's going to happen? What if something happens over here? Especially all over the news on a daily basis. What if this was it? And people, they gossip and talk about, what if this happens? What if that happens? But what if you just put your trust in your Father and let that be his business? Whatever happens, the outcome, you have no control. We don't have control for what's going to happen tomorrow. But just like Jesus said, he said today's problems is enough. We just focus on today. So that's what Jesus did when he lived this life. When he was here, he focused on today. Tomorrow is always going to come. And whatever problems it is, it's always, tomorrow is always going to come. Yet yesterday is always going to be yesterday. Today is today. Okay. Yesterday is always going to follow you. Today is always going to be today. Tomorrow, we're always going to chase tomorrow. When tomorrow comes, it'll be another tomorrow. So there's absolutely no reason to stress or worry or be anxious about anything. So again, you can read that as Matthew chapter 6, starting at verse 25, and read it all the way down to the verse 34. And he says it multiple times, don't be anxious. You know, when Jesus says it multiple times, it must be serious. So take it seriously and take it to heart, and God will bless you, and you will see so much peace in your life. Anything that's of anxiety or worry is not God. That's not God's will. That's not God telling you nothing. You should be concerned about things. That's different. But being worried and anxious, that's different. So we got to focus. Keep your eyes on Jesus Christ. Keep your eyes on the Lord. Keep your eyes on your Father, and trust in him. He has everything under control. He's coming back soon. God bless.